The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Okay, today I have a truly amazing special episode for you. Episode 136 on Delphi. All right, I have said very little, if anything, about this case. Not because I didn't care, because I shed more tears for Abby Williams and Libby German and their families over these senseless murders. Seeing the families, hearing them year after year at Crimecon, praying for an arrest, so badly wanting justice, knowing that nothing could bring the girls back. But today we're going to do Delphi. Now, I know myself. I am not an investigative journalist. I'm a researcher. I may be an analyst who applies my psych background to cases, but I stay in my lane. Today, I am excited to introduce you to the authors of the brand new true crime book, Shadow of the Bridge, The Delphi Murders and the Dark Side of the American Heartland, written by the hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast, Cain and Kevin Greenlee. I am a huge fan of Anya's and Kevin's. They are genuine, intelligent, dedicated professionals. And above all, like me, they strive for accuracy, and they are not given to crazy conspiracy theories, unlike a lot of people who did surround this case. So a bit about my guests. Cain worked as a reporter for Business Insider for 6 years when she covered major national retailers and business-related crime, addressing issues such as multi-level marketing schemes. She is from New York's Westchester County and studied history, which I love, at the College of William and Mary. Her husband, Kevin Greenlee, is an attorney who received his bachelor's and JD from Indiana University. From Indianapolis, he specializes in intellectual property law. Starting in 2017, Kevin conducted extensive research into the Burger Chef murders and currently represents the sister of one of the victims. This work led this married duo to create the Murder Sheet podcast in November 2020. So, quote, "If you're looking for thoughtful, in-depth coverage of lesser-known crimes, this is the True Crime Podcast for you," end quote. This time, though, they're not dealing with one of the lesser-known crimes. Then came Delphi, the unspeakable murders of Liberty German and Abigail Williams in rural Indiana on February 13th, 2017. A gripping case that caught the attention of a broken-hearted world. And we would learn that 14-year-old Libby German videoed their killer. I recently learned that 13-year-old Abby Williams hid this phone under her body as her situation went from dire to worse and provided law enforcement with the most critical piece of evidence, that video. Anya and Kevin are here to discuss with me their book, Shadow of the Bridge, The Delphi Murders and the Dark Side of the American Heartland, which has been out for literally just a couple days. You can get it from Amazon or really any place you buy books. And there's a link on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, September 2025. Now, I have read several books on Delphi over the years, and this one, Shadow of the Bridge, is the most comprehensive, detailed, and accuracy-oriented book on the case to date. And we all met up at Crimecon Denver last week, had a fantastic time getting to hang out, talk true crime and true crime books, and you can find photos of us on my blog as well. So enough said, and without further ado, murder bookies, let me welcome Cain and Kevin Greenlee. Kevin, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for doing this. And I read true crime books. That's what I do. You go out and do the investigative journalism and you write the book for me. It is the most comprehensive book I've read on Delphi.
Thank you
That
so
means
much.
a lot.
I wanted to make sure I said that the right way so the other people who have written books on Delphi weren't exactly offended, but it's the truth. It's absolutely phenomenal.
It's a lot.
Thank you
so much. Like, really, thank you. I'm like blushing.
I will also tell you this. It's just me, so I don't have a lot of time. Yeah. So I do listen to you, but it's sporadic. So I did not follow this case religiously. I mean, I just couldn't. I watched the news. I'd hear the headlines. So my immersion in this was your book. And I do not feel like I missed a thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we tried really hard to just get all the important details in. So many people want to find out about the case, and you can't really say, well, go listen to 100 hours of podcasts.
I promised you I wouldn't ask you a gotcha question, but pizza. Traditional, Sicilian.
I'm going to go with the traditional New York style slice. And I'm not just saying that because I'm from New York and because I'll get exiled if I don't say that.
I also like traditional. I like light cheese, heavy sauce. I also enjoy often when we're in the area, going to Windsor, Ontario. They have their own special pizza style up there, really fresh mozzarella, and the toppings are underneath the cheese. We recently had an opportunity, speaking of pizza, this isn't going to be of any interest whatsoever. We had Altoona style pizza, which is a very unique type of pizza.
Controversial. I mean, it looks disgusting. It looks like an abomination. But we went to this place where they were crafting all these strange regional dishes. And as long as you close your eyes and pretend it's not pizza.
That is Altoona style pizza.
I don't even want to say it. People are going to riot in the streets when they hear it. It's like American cheese, like tomato sauce. Yeah, I know. Why are you bringing this up?
She asked about pizza.
You're going to make us reviled figures on the show before we even start talking about the book. It looks disgusting. It looks horrible. And it looks like, people should be arrested for making it. But it's actually, as a sandwich sort of thing, it's fine. As a pizza, it's not right. But classic New York style slice, we're very boring. When we go to a pizza place, we're just like plain cheese. Like, we're never experimenting. So, like, that's typically what we're doing. Yeah. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry. Are you kidding? I think these things are important because now I really know the essence of the two of you and who you are inside. Okay. Something actually really did occur to me. Reading this book, what kept popping up for me was legacy. I mean, you're not responsible for the legacy of the Delphi case and all of this, but you do talk about some of the controversies, people who I agree with you were less responsible about reporting. Is this the new norm?
Yes. I think it is the new norm. I think this is what true crime is morphing into before our eyes. And that's part of the reason why we decided to include some of this information in the book, because I think if we just seen it as sort of a kind of a weird aberration or just some sort of kind of glitch or whatever, we'd be like, well, maybe it's kind of interesting. But the reason we wanted to include it was because we see it as sort of a warning flare for the rest of this sort of genre and this community. And I want to be very clear. Like, I don't think most people in true crime are getting into it to be sensational or hurt other people or be irresponsible. I think most people are just interested in the topic and they want to have information. So in terms of creators and in terms of the audience, I don't think most people are the problem, but a very small group of people are becoming a big problem and having an impact on this space. And I think we need to be aware of that and moderate accordingly and try to kind of counteract that, because it shouldn't be this way, in my opinion.
I agree. No, I agree. I'm concerned about that. You hear about ethical podcasting that's tossed around a lot. And I think, unfortunately, some people are very misguided One thing I noticed in the book, you're talking about the case the defense presents in court. And we jumped right to the trial and just, yeah, the stuff happened. But the defense is presenting its case, witnesses, testimony. And yet, there are people then who took that or took talking points or however you want to express it, went out and shared a very different narrative with people who weren't in the courtroom. There weren't cameras, no video. And I think that created a vacuum that was filled with wrong information.
Yeah, it was really striking being in that courtroom and actually watching all of this stuff and then hearing how it was described on YouTube and elsewhere. It felt like they were describing something completely different from what was actually occurring. And so it's easy for me to understand why, when I hear a lot of people saying, I was really surprised by the verdict of guilt in this case because I expected acquittal based on what I was hearing. And what you were hearing was, frankly, a very biased, one-sided account. On one very memorable occasion, we had a conversation with one of the defense-oriented YouTubers, and this person was very frank with us. Oh, I think the defense did a bad job with this particular element of the case. And then we looked at that person's YouTube that night, and they were saying, oh, the defense did a great job with this element of the case. So they knew what they were doing. They were just trying to get big numbers by giving their audience what their audience wanted.
Yeah, it was like, we've always been at war with Oceania. You know, it was like this kind of group think. It was bizarre. And like, I mean, we had to keep checking ourselves because we had a viewpoint, but we never wanted to just be like reactively, like emotionally thinking or, you know, oh, this is what we want it to be. So, you know, we're going to say this. Because so many people were saying the complete opposite. And we just kept on being like, are we correct? Like, is our understanding of this situation even remotely accurate? Because we were just, I mean, we kind of felt like we were losing our minds at times because we'd be like reporting something and, you know, trying to make it as factual as possible. And then we'd be hearing all this stuff. And it was just like, what? That, like, we were there. We didn't see that.
I feel your pain because that is concerning. It is very concerning. Just so you know, that kind of thing is not new. Years ago now, I was working at the UN for the United States, and I was told to go to this briefing and whatnot, and you know, took my notes and went to the briefing, came back and said, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day, the news reports were, what? So I've had that feeling of being in the room and going, did I nod off? I didn't hear that. Where you're just taken aback by it. But if that's the only voice people are hearing, why wouldn't they believe it? And then how do you, because the prosecution cannot go out on the streets with the town crier saying, okay, hey, this is what they can't do that.
No.
So I have no answers. I wish I had some great suggestion. I don't know how to fix that. It's disturbing. I want to give my voice to, please use your critical thinking skills. Please do not quote from one source of information. That was also one of the reasons that I have not dealt with Delphi other than offering some sympathy and support for the family, because I knew I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, that's so responsible of you because, you know, it's like sometimes people just comment anyways. And it's like, there's a real danger in that.
Well, they certainly are. One of the things I think that goes hand in hand with this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was largely a circumstantial case.
Yeah.
And that requires people to really think. And it wasn't, here's the DNA, here's the video, you know, we have the knife in his hands, go. None of that. I think we've gotten very accustomed, you know, and I call it intellectually lazy in expecting all of these cases to just be, you know, slam dunk, here's the video. Oh, okay, tested. Okay, 99 billion chances that it's not anybody else but this person. And this was not that. This was an old-fashioned police case.
I think that's a great point. And I think that's why a lot of people have had a difficult time understanding why the jury reached the verdict that they did, because you can't explain the case against Richard Allen in 10 seconds. You can't say, oh, it was DNA or whatever, as you say. You have to sit down. It might take maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But if you pay attention during those 5 or 10 minutes, it's not complicated. You just have to have a few pieces to put together. And when you do that, then it becomes very, very convincing. But I think one of the problems is if it takes 5 minutes to explain it, most TV shows have like 2 or 3 minutes for a story, and they're not going to really go into it.
I'll say this, I'll add this. It's almost this case, like the metaphor I would use, it's like a rope. So you braid the different strands together, and then all together it holds up a great weight, right? But if so it's not something where it's just kind of prefabricated and you're going to get it and it's going to be great. You actually have to twist it together in order for it to work. And I do think that level, whether it's through people not wanting to do it, or in certain cases, as Kevin said, there just being limitations to how much information can be conveyed at once, I think that really hurt the case in terms of public understanding. And I would just add, one thing, we talked about some of the people that we felt were shading the truth, to put it very nicely, at trial. But there was other people who weren't understanding it. And it was not any sort of malfeasance. It wasn't that they had bad intentions. You could tell maybe they weren't used to covering a case like this, or, they're coming from, national media. They're coming from a place where they're used to kind of the big, flashy, sexy DNA evidence versus just sort of a methodically pieced together case. And then you see the seasoned reporters who have been doing cases like this forever, and they got it. I mean, they're like, yeah, this makes sense. But other people are saying, wait, I don't really get why we're focusing so much on this timeline. Aren't we going to hear some DNA evidence? And it's like, you're not used to covering like a standard murder case. You're used to covering the big, flashy cases, and perhaps that is coloring your view of the strength of the case.
Absolutely. We are very much on the same page. I mean, I don't know what to do about that. Again, to sit there and say, please read multiple sources when you're, especially during a trial like this. Lord, they waited 7 years. These poor girls. You went to Delphi. You were out. Is that bridge as rickety as it sounds?
Yeah, that bridge terrifies me. I will say they refurbished part of it. So now you can actually walk onto a portion of it, and it's got railings, and it's like all reinforced so you can go out onto it and kind of look over. But then the rest of it remains extremely rickety. A lot of people who covered the case would actually go onto it, which I always thought was wild. We never did. First of all, I don't think you're allowed to, and we're very much rule followers. And second of all, I'm terrified of heights. We would be the people to fall off of it. Yeah, no, it's like absolutely not. People who've been on it have told me it actually sways when you're on it, so it's very unstable.
Yeah, no, I have not been there. That's why I had to ask you. I was going to follow up and say, did you actually go out there? I am so relieved you did not. I like you even more now. Now listen, God bless the daredevils in this world. We need those people. It is not me, however. No, I'll cheer you on. Hold on there. Hold on. No. Mm-mm.
We'll call 911 if someone gets hurt on it, but we're definitely not going out there ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Something else that occurred to me was, I think it was a small point, is that Richard Allen had discouraged his wife, Kathy Allen, from going to search for the missing teenagers. And that struck me. I thought that was huge. I mean, that would be, I'm a true crimer. I understand I have a perspective, but to me, that would be a big red flag.
We agreed when we heard that detail. And I will say this, like, let's put it in their context of this is like one of the greatest tragedies and emergencies to ever happen in Delphi, Indiana. This is a town that banded together. I hope this doesn't sound like a facetious comparison, But it's sort of like New York City with 9/11. People are coming forward. They're trying to help. They're giving blood. They're getting involved. They're sticking together and taking care of each other. That's what Delphi was doing. So you had employers giving people the day off of work just to go search. You had people gathering together and making plans. Okay, like let's go meet at early in the morning and then go and we'll join the search parties. So it's not just a situation where law enforcement or first responders are involved. The community's getting involved. So when you consider that, it's even more striking that somebody would just say, not only am I not going to participate, but I don't want my wife participating. That's very odd.
Especially when they had their own daughter. Because I don't think there's a parent in the world who didn't feel that loss. And certainly not like the families did. But I have 2 daughters. I immediately rolled the tape back and remembered my girls at those ages, 13 or 14 years old. They're going out for a freaking walk. And then to say, no, don't go help. Again, it's not something that you're going to give them the death penalty for that. But it just seemed to me that was really striking. See, I'm telling you, we're on the same page. We did not compare notes beforehand, people. I promise you.
And as you said, you can't give someone the death penalty or condemn them just for one thing. But with Richard Allen, there's a lot of little things that end up adding up to a portrait of a man. And I think that's ultimately the evidence against him, but also just little things like that in the background where you're like, this man's behavior is not normal.
Yes, I'm very much a student of behavior. And did you get to hear his voice?
Oh, yes. Yes, we did. And we heard it in trial. So this was, they brought in evidence that were phone calls between him and his wife where he ended up confessing.
Oh, right.
So the thing that made me freeze, like the classic goosebumps, hair on the back of your neck standing up, was when, they played the video. So you hear that kind of raspy guys down the hill kind of thing. And when I heard Richard Allen's voice, that's the voice of Bridge Guy immediately. Like that was my reaction. And I was almost like, I was trying to hold myself back from that because I wanted to kind of really analyze it. But when I heard it, it was just like this instinctive, like, oh my God, it's him. And him saying his own name, he's like, it would be like, the standard voice from the prison being like, this is a call from, and then he'd say Ricky. And it was like, that's Bridge Guy. What was your reaction?
It was exactly the same. It was really, really striking.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was just, it was alarming. And it was sort of like, how did no one hear this before?
Yeah, because I did the same thing. I listened, but I'm listening through the internet. I'm listening online. Well, evidently the technology was not on the favor of the prosecution. I did laugh when I read that part. But I'm listening, online, I'm, guys down the hill, listening. And I pulled up what I could of hearing him speak. And I went, yeah. Then I listened to another part. I know they didn't have enough words from Bridge Guy to do the proper voice analysis, but I'm not an idiot. I can listen and hear things. I'm not a trained auditory technician or anything, but I was also a high school teacher. And it's interesting sometimes that you get to do things like potty patrol and you're approaching the bathroom and you stop and you listen and you know exactly which girls were in the bathroom doing the bad things that they weren't supposed to be doing in the bathroom. So it's like, Vicky, Renee, Veronica, out here now. And they're like, you can hear, So maybe it's that kind of thing that I was just very sensitive to voices, but it sure as heck sounds like him to me.
No, I agree. And as you said, like no one's saying that should be evidence against him at trial because there's just not enough. It's not scientifically sound. But as you said, we don't need to check our common sense at the door when we're looking at things like this.
Yeah, it didn't take long to figure that out. But again, like you said, you're taking and weaving that rope and putting the tendrils together. It came together for me and I wasn't really surprised. But again, I wasn't in the area of the internet where I think truth was silenced.
Yeah, I think, and this is going to be interesting to get your perspective on this. You deal with stories, right? You deal with these books and narratives about crime and sort of what that looks like. But narratives can be extremely powerful. And I think in the corner of the internet where the Delphi case was big, certain narratives took hold. And I would say most people, I think, and this might sound surprising to people, but I think most people were quite open-minded and sort of saying, hey, I'd like to see how things progress. Maybe I'm not quite convinced by what I've heard yet, but let's see what happens. And that's wonderful. And so I think that's the majority. But for certain people, there was a narrative of the police are evil and corrupt. All of Delphi is evil and corrupt. The families must be in on it. They can't just be victims. They've got to be perpetrators. And those narratives proved very powerful for people, I think, with a more conspiratorial mindset. And a lot of them just never shook that off. Some did. I mean, some came around, and that's impressive for those who were able to change their minds. But other people, it was less about the evidence and more about these powerful narratives and stories they're telling themselves.
And what you say about things being silenced, I think that is a great point, because so many of the people who believed strongly that there was a conspiracy, they believed there was great evil afoot in Carroll County, and the government was in on it, the chief of police, the sheriff. All of these people were so convinced in the righteousness of their cause that whenever somebody popped up and said, let's just look at the evidence and see where that leads, and maybe this isn't true what you think, they would respond to that person with threats and harassment, to the extent where a lot of sensible people would look at the case and say, I don't want to be a part of this discourse, because if I go in there and I don't agree with the extremist, I'm going to get attacked, and attacked brutally. We've certainly been attacked by these people repeatedly.
Yeah, and we're not alone. I mean, it's pretty common. And as Kevin said, I think the key thing to understand their behavior is they believe they're morally righteous and more morally righteous than anybody else, and that they're combating evil. And so if you think of yourself as this sort of heroic freedom fighter who's doing the right thing, any action you take against people who are enemies is justified.
I agree with everything you're saying. That is why it is so important to make sure that the opinions and beliefs that you have are not just emotional. Your opinions have to be rooted in facts. You have to be able to separate your emotional wants and needs from this actual case. So to think that there's a conspiracy that large, conspiracies always fall apart. They really do. There's always that one guy who's going to talk. Like you said, bravo for those who were able to take a breath, step back and say, wait a minute, let me look at this. I can't imagine the motivation for the families doing this. And then instead of the police being angry at families, to then go and join them in this huge, crazy cover-up. It just really doesn't make sense.
And I'll add to this, and it's sad because, some of these people are very energetic and they might have, good qualities otherwise, but it's like, go out and go outside, do some community service. There's other things that could use some of this attention,
Gardening. They need to go garden. They can say anything they want. The plants will suck in all of the carbon dioxide, and they will be very, very happy. Gardening, I highly recommend it.
Well said. And I mean, I was telling this to a lady we were talking with at a book signing, and, because she was saying, well, I don't know, I have some skepticism, and that's all good. There's a difference between being skeptical and being a contrarian, where you're just saying, well, I'm going to just say the opposite of anything, that's like a mainstream opinion or whatever. And what I said to her was, this book is going to hopefully help you understand the evidence and understand why the jury made its decision. Whether or not you would have made the same decision on that jury is up to you ultimately. And there's a range of possibilities of what people might feel comfortable with convicting on, and that's okay. I mean, we're all different. But it'll hopefully make you at least not surprised why the jury rendered that verdict. And so it's like we don't all have to have the same opinion. We all do have to deal with the same set of facts.
Absolutely. Something you said, I didn't want to blow past it. Nobody should be harassing you. Nobody should be threatening you. That's a crime. It really is. You are allowed to have your opinion. And other people, like you said, can think differently without harassing and attacking each other. Yeah, that's not okay.
We keep telling them that and they won't listen. No, I mean, but I appreciate that very much. I mean, it's really weird for me. I'm coming from the business beat of journalism. So I was writing about retail. And so sometimes, as much as I enjoy doing a true crime podcast and getting to report on the crime beat, sometimes I really miss the old days because, I would have never, seen that Bloomberg scooped me on a Walmart story and been like, oh, you should go die. There was like a level of collegial behavior that was expected and professionalism, and the Forbes guy wouldn't be like calling me out on YouTube. So like I miss sometimes like working with professionals, and there are a lot of professionals in true crime and they're great to deal with, but there's just like this kind of undercurrent sometimes of people being kind of nutty.
Yeah. That's why I hope as we go forward, people will hear this and start to think just crack open the door for the possibility that there actually might be evidence that swayed the jury. I did listen to your interview with a female juror. Absolutely fascinating.
We so appreciated. She reached out to us and we were just like honored by that because, I know they were nervous about getting doxxed and whatnot. So she was incredibly brave to speak out. And I loved what she had to say because you really got a sense of why they made the decision they did, but also like what evidence they thought was very important and maybe some things that they kind of set aside.
Yeah, truly. And that's what's important. I also appreciated the process. They didn't walk in, take a vote, up, we're hung, or take a vote, up, convict him. They had to work through their own doubts and reconsider and see how others were thinking about certain pieces as the puzzle was being put together. And that's what you want your jury to do. That sounded like sorry, Richard Allen, but it sounded like the best case scenario to me.
We agree. And, one thing that I thought was fascinating that we learned was, people will come up and chat with us if they recognize us and they say, do you think he got the right guy? But at times people have said, well, I'm concerned that they convicted him based on this ballistics or this cartridge evidence. And I didn't think that was very strong. And what I tell them is the jury set that aside. They ultimately decided collectively that some people, a lot of them believed in it and thought that was good evidence. But enough of them were like, at least one of them said, no, I'm not basing any decision on this. I'm not confident enough in this. They set that aside. So it's not even like any ultimate decision was made based on that. So it's kind of interesting to learn that where you think like what's going to resound with the jury, but now we actually know.
Yes, that was funny because I couldn't get past that evidence. Ballistics started in the 16th century. 16th century. And it has definitely been part of law enforcement for 100 years? This is not something that's like we just whipped it out and said, hey, this has been around forever. Other books, I have done research on ballistics. And again, I'm certainly no expert. There have been plenty of ballistics used to connect this with this. And I know we're talking cycled versus shot and fired and all of that. But why would you think the same gun would not make the same marks? I don't want to get into a whole ballistics debate, but I'm saying these are the things that made me think it was good. So I was really impressed that they did come to a decision saying, okay, not so sure. What about the rest of it? And that's what I mean. The breadcrumbs were there. You just had to, you put them together and you wound up with a loaf of bread. Look at that.
Look at that. Exactly.
I want to ask you how's Delphi doing in the aftermath of this? They came together, right? They're out, they're searching for the girls. They're found deceased. The grieving that went on, and for years not knowing, looking around, suspicious at your neighbors. But now you have, Kathy Allen. As far as I know, she still lives there. How's the community doing? Because you have this still groups that are unsettled about the outcome.
I think Kathy Allen may have moved away from what we understand.
I think so.
I think
yeah.
so.
Okay.
But definitely vacated that residence.
I would have.
Yeah, fair.
We were just in Delphi actually a few days ago. It's a great town. I think they're in the process of healing, but it's an absolutely wonderful community with a lot to offer.
I'd say that like the loss of Abby and Libby is never going to be made whole, or nothing can ever help or fix that. But what people are doing is, I think, trying to focus on their legacy and the positivity of that. And things like there's a memorial park in their names that, is a safe place for kids to play, which is like perfect, because of what happened to them. And there's scholarship funds. And so there are things that people can do to remember Abby and Libby and help them continue to have such a positive impact on the community. I always felt it was a town that was under siege because this happened and all the parents are terrified. The kids are terrified. Anyone who cares about the community is terrified. Anyone there is terrified. And then people started coming out of the woodwork and like just accusing random people of the murders. And it's like, no one's safe from both this mysterious killer, but also the internet discourse.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a positive answer to that. They're healing. They're never going to forget, but you can take your life back and try to find positivity in that legacy of those girls. I've heard you've said that they solved their own murder. And I think that is so powerful.
Yeah. Talking about the girls and talking about that aspect of it, I remember, interviewing all these different, like very seasoned, kind of tough law enforcement guys. That was the thing that people would start tearing up or getting choked up talking about it, because they truly, sincerely felt that without the evidence that these girls managed to collect and preserve, it would have possibly had a not as good an outcome. And just the presence of mind that they had to have in order to make that happen under like the most horrifying circumstances possible is really overwhelming to think about sometimes.
Yeah, the video Libby took of Bridge Guy, this is the person who attacked them and murdered them. It's not crystal clear. You can't see his face, but you can see exactly what he is wearing and how he is moving. And so then when we hear from other people on the trails that day who say, oh, yes, we saw a person dressed exactly like that around that time. And then you have Richard Allen come and say, I was dressed exactly like that. And I saw these people who say they saw Bridge Guy. It's absolutely crucial to solving this case. And I'm not sure there would have been an arrest in this case if not for that video. And if not for the fact that Abby hid the phone with her body.
Yeah. That's, I think it is so powerful. They had the mindset to even process that. I'm sure we've all had scary situations. I can't say I've ever been attacked, but I've certainly had scary situations. And being that purposeful, so I can really appreciate that. It was wise. These are little kids. It was a wise choice. It was a brave choice. What if she got caught with that phone? The what ifs can drive you crazy and give you nightmares. But again, mom here, thinking about my own girls. Wow. I'm so proud of them.
That means a lot. And that's what we want the book to convey. If it can convey anything to anybody, these girls are heroes. They're absolute heroes. And this wouldn't have happened without them doing that. And I think at some point we can leave behind the horrible thing that happened to them, or at least try to sort of refocus our attention from the pathetic little man who did it to these girls. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that we should be focusing on. And they're the ones who are going to have this positive legacy that lasts for years. And I think I feel angry sometimes with talking about, because it's like they would have done such good in the world and they would have had such, nice lives, and they had people who cared about them and loved them. And the positive impact they made in just their short time on Earth was extraordinary. And that was taken away from them. But I think we can all we can all just kind of remember them, and just this other guy doesn't deserve to be remembered, frankly.
No, he really doesn't. I understand how our legal system works, so I am sure there will be appeals. I have not had a chance to look and see. Is there any news on that front?
There is going to be an appeal, and the appeals lawyers are working on that even as we speak. Most recently, they filed a request with the relevant judges for an extension because they only got the transcript of the trial relatively recently. And in addition to that, Richard Allen has been moved from Indiana to some facility out of state. And so that makes it more difficult for his appeals lawyers to consult with him as they need to prepare an appeal. So I think it's likely that the judges will grant the extension. And so it may be a while before the appeal is filed. I can tell you, in my opinion, I feel that any appeal is not likely to really go anywhere. I think this trial was handled by the book, and that Richard Allen got a fair trial, and that the verdict that the jury found against him will stand the test of time.
Are they going to say it was ineffective counsel?
They might. It wouldn't be necessarily a bad idea, because with an appeal, you want to just throw whatever you can at the wall. And
yeah,
like the appeals attorneys have a positive reputation. They have a reputation for being very good at their jobs. So these are attorneys, I would imagine, are going to be doing whatever they can. One thing we say that it's important to note, we felt the defense team, in this case, the trial team, they did a job that I would not only call inept at times, but also dishonorable. I mean, I don't feel like I don't think they and the truth were in the same room a lot. And I don't say that about many defense attorneys. I think defense attorneys are heroes, because defense attorneys are the line between all of us and the government, and they're protecting innocent people too by preventing government overreach. So God bless the defense attorneys. But these folks, I mean, it was sort of like that meme of the guy pointing in the mirror and like, get in there and make it all about you. Like, they're like filming themselves for docuseries. They're just carrying on like they're Atticus Finch. And it was just like more about the performativeness than the actual performance. But I will say this. There is a very low bar. You have to really badly bungle something to be considered ineffective. And what I'm talking about is like not objecting, showing up completely high. We can all roll our eyes at them, but I don't think they were ineffective, in terms of that standard.
And another thing to keep in mind is that the trial court judge, Fran Gull, at one point, she removed the defense attorneys because she said, I don't think they're doing a good job. And Richard Allen responded by fighting and taking it all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court to get these two lawyers back. And so I'm not sure how he can then say, oh, these lawyers that you warned me were ineffective. It was his decision to knowingly take them back.
Well, at the same time, wasn't this the man who was supposedly having a psychotic break?
Yeah, allegedly.
Or I guess we have all of these going on at the same time.
Yeah.
I have no sense of this, but maybe you've got a little bit more. Was he malingering?
I think yes, personally. I mean, and when I say that, I mean, I do not believe he was psychotic. Was he dealing with some real emotions or some real kind of like, I'm freaking out right now? Possibly. We're not in his head, and I think there might be an element of that. But I'm going to put this really bluntly. This guy is like the whiniest little whinge bag to ever whinge. Okay, this is a guy who needed, his mommy wife to cut up all his food for him, emotionally at least, and pick up the pieces. So when Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and nobody was able to, piece him back together again, I think there might have been some real anguish around that. Psychosis, and we've talked to a number of people who deal with psychotic disorders, and they're in community, like they're listeners, and they're saying, okay, I take medication for this, and this is what my experience has been. Like, I think we talked to like 3 people, And they were all like, first of all, psychosis isn't something you can turn on and off.
Correct.
Right. Like, you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to just stop being psychotic now. I mean, if only it were that easy for these folks, you know? I mean, but like, this guy is like, you know, correctional officers are describing him as, you know, looking to make sure they're looking at him when he's, you know, doing these things. He's very tentative about some of the grosser behaviors. I'll leave it at that. But like some of the disturbing behaviors, it's like he's almost having to amp himself into doing it rather than just doing it. He, in conversations with that are recorded, is very calm, clear. He's not saying anything like, oh, I'm the ghost of Charlemagne. You know, he's saying like, no, I'd like to tell you something and you're not listening to me. You know, I think whether he's like purely faking it to get something, maybe, or whether it's just like he's not psychotic, but he's basically throwing a hissy fit, maybe. Listen, Westville's a tough prison, okay? That's not going to be a good place for anybody. And I don't discount that. And I don't want to just dismiss that. But I think whether what he was doing was out of mental illness, no, I don't. I don't believe that. What do you think?
I agree.
You agree? Okay, good.
I like it when she talks for a long time. I just say, yeah, I agree.
Well, you did that beautifully. No, I appreciate that. You know, I just wasn't sure. I did not see him sitting there. If I was like, you must pick left or right, I would have said he's faking it. But I just wasn't sure. So it does make me feel better that you have some insight into that.
Here's one thing that I heard in trial that I thought was so important. You know, these experts, one of the people involved in his care in the prison talked about how, you know, they're talking about, okay, we maybe think he might be malingering or maybe he's not. But either way, he's doing these things that are detrimental to his health. He's like banging his head on the wall, doing things like that. It doesn't matter if he's psychotic or not. He's hurting himself. And so we're going to have to deal with it as if he's psychotic. And I think, you know, that's important. So, I mean, we can give him a little bit of leeway there and say that his behavior was extreme and certainly was reasonable to raise questions around, you know, possibly being psychotic.
Agreed. Okay, we come to that point where is there anything else you want to share?
You asked such great questions. So just, I want to share, thank you so much.
We really appreciate it.
An honor. I would say that me, I hope that the book introduces people to those who worked on the case. And I think a lot of them, you know, whether it was the prosecutors or the police officers on this, were really maligned in a lot of circles. And even people who weren't necessarily maligning them, I think there was an assumption of like, it's not solved, so the police messed it up. You know, and I think it's good to have scrutiny on large, important government bodies. It's not like we should just say, you know, I'm sure they'll handle it. You know, we got to have scrutiny. But at the same time, these are human beings. And I hope it comes across that these people lived and breathed this case for years. This investigation had flaws. This investigation was not perfect, just like anything run by human beings isn't perfect. And unfortunately, the crucial tip was lost, and it took a wonderful volunteer named Kathy Shank to find it. She's a hero. But I think what these officers and what the prosecutors did that was heroic was they never, ever gave up. They never left these girls behind. Emotionally or in terms of their work, they were at it constantly. And ultimately, I think that's what we should want and expect and commend from law enforcement, just not giving up even if there's problems. So,
yeah, I'd like to echo that. This was such a terrible story in so many ways. And it was very difficult to report. To get into the trial every day, we'd have to wait out in line for 8, 10, 12 hours in the cold. It was very, very difficult. But at the end of the day, it was actually inspiring to see how hard men and women worked. And it was their North Star. They just kept their eye on getting justice for Abby and Libby. They had to deal with harassment. They had to deal with lies. They had to deal with all sorts of nonsense. But they kept their eyes and their attention focused on justice. And ultimately, through a lot of hard work and sacrifice, they achieved it.
Bravo. Absolutely. No, believe me, I believe that comes through in the book. Totally. I had heard that the investigation was being botched. That floated through my orbit at one point. And I was like, oh my God. And then I'm reading in the book, and they said, mistakes are made. Things do get misfiled. It happens. You're right. They didn't give up. They kept at it. Here we go down the Odinism thing. They investigated that.
They did.
They didn't just sit here and say, no, there's no nuts running around in our forest. They went and they looked into this. They investigated this. They got alibis. They looked into this and said, nope.
Yeah.
So pretty inclined to think that after you have investigated people, you have checked to see where they were. You've checked timestamps. It wasn't that.
Yeah. The Odinism thing was just such out of a pulp novel from like the 40s. And listen, weird stuff happens. We all know this. We're all true crime people. So like, you got to be open to it. And we certainly were when it started. We were, like, okay, this is pretty outlandish, but maybe sometimes the truth is outlandish. And it just fell apart. But you're absolutely right. It's like, oh, the police covered up Odinism. The only reason we had any of those leads was because the police investigated it and they did not find evidence leading back to the crime. And ultimately, that has to be the standard. You can't just say, this is interesting, or, ooh, this guy has a weird Facebook presence. It's just ultimately not important when you have, you need to connect someone to the crime scene. And they were only ever able to do that with Richard Allen.
Exactly. And that's why Richard Allen was found guilty. And he will spend, I hope, the rest of his life in prison, wherever that happens to be.
I hope so, too.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell everybody I know to buy your book.
Thank you.
I absolutely loved it. And I understand you are going to be at Crimecon, right?
Yes.
We are.
And so am I. So we're going to get a chance
we're going to hang out.
Get together. Absolutely. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. I haven't packed. I haven't even thought about it. I leave tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Godspeed.
The panic is real. The panic at this point is real.
I am so nervous, but so excited. And like, honestly, we're going there to meet folks like yourself and meet listeners. And I think it's going to be a blast and just really a cool experience. This is our first time going.
Oh my gosh. This is my third on Creator Row. And, I also find my people there. They get it. My mom will say to me, you're still doing this murder thing. Isn't it a little morbid? And like I said, she loves me to death, but it's like, well, it's not actually morbid, Mom. It's empowering, fighting for justice and advocacy. And it's still murder. At Crimecon, no one is even going to blink because they all get it. They all get it.
Yeah.
Oh, and they will tell you what they love and they will tell you what they hate. And that's perfectly okay too. But it's just absolutely wonderful. There are people. They really are. Bring plenty of water, comfortable shoes.
We need to do that. We got to do that. We will be probably hitting you up for tips throughout the event. So we're going to annoy you, but I'm excited.
All right. Well, then I'm going to see you literally in a couple days. Kickoff party. Here we go.
We got this.
All right. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come back anytime.
We'd love that.
We love that. Please, don't be a stranger. We had such fun in this conversation. So, anytime.
It was pizza. I got you at pizza.
You hooked us.
Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Love you
Take
too.
care now.
All right. Bye.
Guys, so that wraps up my special episode with Aine, Cain, and Kevin Greenlee, hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast and the authors of this amazing book. You just have to go out and buy it. It is just that simple. It is truly the primer on everything Delphi. Gosh, that was a lot of fun. Listen, I'm going to go back now because that has to happen. And I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank my amazing supporters on Patreon, because they also helped me pick our next book. First episode will be dropping shortly. A Tangled Web, A Cyber Stalker, A Deadly Obsession, and The Twisting Path to Justice by Leslie Rule, the daughter of the renowned true crime author Anne Rule. I met Leslie at Crimecon a few years back, and she's just the most gracious, wonderful person. And A Tangled Web, her book, begins on a bleak, chilly November in 2012, when 37-year-old Carrie Farver vanished without a trace from her life in Omaha, Nebraska. Shocking everyone, she left her young son behind, and that ignited a firestorm of concern and speculation. But her mom, Nancy Rainey, absolutely refused to believe that her daughter had just simply walked away from her life. So brace yourself for one of the most intricate and bewildering true crime stories I have ever encountered. It will be out shortly. I see you as you hear me. Please take a few minutes to leave an awesome review that will help me make new murder bookies. You can share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can join Patreon for $2 to $4 a month. Links are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com with sources, photographs, and show notes. Always trust your gut and lock your doors and windows. I'm going to do the fangirling. Oh my God, I loved your book. I loved your podcast.
Well, thank you so much.
Out of my system. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.